Hi, I'm Misako. For years, I've been teaching Japanese, but there was something I've been holding back. Now I finally feel strong enough to share my story. Not just about language, but about identity, trust, and healing. Today, I want to share something deeply personal. Not because I want to complain, but because I know someone out there needs to hear this. Sharing a personal story takes courage, but I think this story connects to why I initially wanted to start YouTube, so I'll share it anyway. I actually wrote this down in advance because I didn't want to rush through my thoughts. I want to speak slowly and carefully from my heart. I've lived in 4 different countries, and each place has shaped who I am in different ways. I've taught over 4,000 Japanese lessons, but until recently, I couldn't say one simple thing. No, that's not okay. As a Japanese woman, as a teacher, as someone who feels deeply, I used to think being kind meant always accepting. But over time, I started to see things differently. Some experiences in the past made me realize I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I've come to understand that saying no isn't unkind. It's how we set respectful boundaries. And those boundaries aren't just good for me, they are good for others too. For a long time, I tried to explain Japanese culture in a way that made sense and made students excited to learn. But sometimes when I explained things like group pressure or vague communication, I realized I was also describing the very things that hurt me growing up. And I hesitated. I thought, if I say this, will it make them dislike Japan? Am I being too negative? But now I believe every culture has both beautiful and painful parts. I've lived in 4 countries outside Japan and each had both. It's natural. Still for me, Japan's pressure to be nice, don't speak up, and keep the peace was especially hard. As an HSP, highly sensitive person, I often felt I don't belong here. But now that I'm an adult, I've started listening to my own voice, my soul's voice, and I've realized that voice deserves to be heard. When I teach Japanese, sometimes I say things like, in Japanese culture, it's rude to say no directly or to say you don't like a certain food when it's being served. But once, an American teenager girl said, "That's scary. What am I supposed to do if I can't say no in Japan? What if I really don't want to do something?" And that made me stop and think again and again. First of all, when I teach Japanese, I never want my students to feel like I can't say what I really feel just because I'm speaking in Japanese. Instead, I want them to use Japanese to engage with the world confidently, without being disadvantaged by cultural gaps or misunderstandings. Actually, that idea came from my professor at Portland State University, Watanabe Sensei and Curtin Sensei. When I read their syllabus, I was so moved and inspired. I want my students to be able to say no whenever they need to. I'm just explaining how Japanese people might react or communicate so that students can make informed choice. So I told that student, please don't feel like you can't say no in Japanese. You absolutely can. We will learn a few different ways to say it, so you can choose the one that feels right for the situation. But bottom line is you should never be afraid to say no. Even after that lesson, I kept thinking about it. I was surprised at how naturally she could say no in the culture she grew up in. It made me realize that she had been taught that saying no is part of self-respect. That's the opposite of how I was raised. In my culture, we are often taught to prioritize the group over individual needs. And that sometimes made me question, what is my true voice? What did I really want to say in the first place? But just because we grow up in one environment doesn't mean we have to follow it forever. We have the power to make new choices. I've come to see that for someone like me who takes things seriously and cares deeply, this cultural pressure can be harmful. So lately, I've been training myself to say no when I need to. Recently, I faced a situation where a student's parent was clearly disrespectful. That parent was also from another Asian country. Even though we were communicating in English, I felt my mind slipping into that familiar hierarchy, the one where I'm not allowed to speak up. Normally, in the culture, I would have blamed myself and quietly distanced myself or just disappeared. But this time, I decided to speak up. Not to attack them, obviously, but to share how I felt, to express my side of the story. I realized that when I feel silenced, I tend to focus too much on how the other person might react. But this time, I choose to focus on my truth. I wrote in the email, your way of communicating didn't show mutual respect. You are not the only one choosing a teacher. I choose my students too. And I don't teach people who don't show respect. I was shaking as I typed in, because in my culture, we don't talk to elders like that, especially not to men. But I knew I wasn't being rude. I was protecting my dignity. And I could do that because I know how deeply I care about my students. So many of them grow with me, trust me, and truly value our time together. For those students, I want to keep teaching. But in order to do that, I must say no when it's necessary. That's why I started this channel. Not just to teach Japanese, but to share the feelings behind the language. The things I couldn't say in a regular lesson, the things that make me human. This channel is for anyone who loves languages but also wants to grow as a human. Let's explore together beyond grammar, beyond fear.